Ma'am, you can't be here. The voice belonged to a young Marine captain blocking her way. He was tall with a hard jaw and a perfectly pressed uniform. His name tag said Hayes. He held up his hand like a wall. Brenda gave him a friendly, apologetic smile. Sorry, Captain. I just wanted to get closer to where my son is graduating today. I get it, he replied, though his tone said otherwise, but only authorized personnel can use this path. Families need to stay back at the grandstands. He nodded toward the seating area, his eyes looking her over like she might be trouble. He saw a woman in her 40s with long blonde hair pulled back, wearing a simple top and jeans. Just another mom, he figured. Nothing special. Of course, Brenda answered, keeping her voice steady. I'll go back now. She turned to walk away, but the captain shifted sideways, blocking her again. I'm going to need your visitor pass, ma'am, he said, his voice getting harder. Brenda's smile stayed in place, but something in her went still. She knew this feeling well, the quiet dismissal, the assumption that she was just some clueless civilian who didn't belong. She reached into her purse, pulled out the folded paper pass, and handed it over. Captain Hayes studied it like he was looking for a forgery, holding it up to the light. He compared her photo to her face, staring a little too long. Brenda Lo, he read out loud. Here for recruit Adam Lowe. His voice was thick with doubt. Look, ma'am, we have to be careful here. This is a secure military base. I'm sure you understand. I do, she agreed, her calm standing in sharp contrast to his tension. I was actually stationed here for a few months, years ago. I know how things work. This seemed to annoy him even more. The thought that this woman in her bright blue shirt had any real connection to this place, beyond being someone's mother, struck him as ridiculous. He saw her as a potential problem wrapped in a polite, motherly package. Stationed here doing what? Working as a contractor, military spouse? Neither, Brenda said simply. His thin patience finally broke. With all due respect, ma'am, your background doesn't matter here. What matters is you're somewhere you're not supposed to be. I've given you a direct order to go back to the viewing area. If you don't follow it, I'll have the military police escort you out. The threat hung heavy in the humid air. Some families walking by slowed down, curious about this stiff officer facing off with a calm, ordinary-looking woman. Brenda felt their stare. The public nature of this was a familiar sting, a small embarrassment she'd faced in different ways over the years. All she wanted was to watch her son graduate, to not make a scene, to just be a proud mother for one day. Captain, she said, lowering her voice to a reasonable tone, I heard your order. I'm doing what you asked. No need for threats. It's not a threat. It's standard procedure, he shot back, puffing out his chest slightly. He was a man who followed every rule exactly, and the rules said an unauthorized civilian in a restricted zone was a problem that needed handling. Honestly, your attitude is concerning. I need to see a photo ID, your driver's license. Brenda sighed quietly to herself. This had become a performance now, a show of power for his own ego. She reached into her purse again and pulled out her wallet, handing over her license. He took it from her, his fingers brushing hers, and began examining it closely. He looked at her face, then the license, then her face again. He noted her address, her birth date. It was a power move meant to make her feel small and out of place. He was treating her like a criminal, not a guest. Everything check out, Captain? Brenda asked, her voice still frustratingly even. Why were you really walking down this path, Mrs. Lo? He pressed, ignoring her question. The restrooms are clearly marked in the other direction. This path goes straight to the recruit barracks and the command post. It's the last place a family member should be wandering around. I made a wrong turn. I apologize, she said. I'm not sure I buy that, Hayes said, his voice dropping low. He was convinced he'd uncovered something suspicious. Maybe she was an angry ex-wife or a reporter trying to sneak in. His mind raced through possibilities, each one casting himself as the sharp-eyed protector of the base. He waved over a young lance corporal walking past. Get over here, Marine. The young man, barely older than her son, snapped to attention. Sir, stay here, Hayes announced loudly enough for the growing crowd to hear. This person isn't cooperating and might need to be taken to the military police. The humiliation burned hot on Brenda's neck. Her son was on that parade field about to become a Marine, and here she was being publicly shamed by an officer who couldn't see past her blonde hair and civilian clothes. She felt a spark of the old anger, the familiar fire she'd learned to control over 20 years. Captain, you're making a serious error, she said, the gentleness leaving her voice for the first time. It wasn't a threat, just a cold statement of truth. Her change in tone only made him dig in harder. The only error here, ma'am, is you leaving the grandstands. He stepped toward her. Now give me your arm. We're taking a walk. He reached out and gripped her forearm firmly to lead her away. As his fingers closed around her arm, the sleeve of her blue top slid up a few inches, and that's when he saw it. On the inside of her wrist, partly hidden by her watchband, was a tattoo. It wasn't the decorative kind he usually saw. It was a stark professional design in black ink. It showed a caduceus, the twin snakes of medicine, but instead of wrapping around a staff, they were coiled around a Ka bar, the famous fighting knife of the Marine Corps. Below the image in small precise letters were 2 words and a date, Phantom Fury, November. As the captain stared at the ink on her skin, the world around him seemed to blur. For a heartbeat, the humid Carolina air was replaced by the bone-dry chill of a desert night. The smell of salt marsh vanished, replaced by the sharp scent of dust, gunpowder and blood. He heard a ghostly echo of shouting, of cracking gunfire, of the desperate urgent cry that every Marine both dreads and hopes for. Corpsman up. It was a shadow of a memory, a story he'd only heard in classrooms at officer training, a legend from a battle fought when he was still in high school. The image of a fallen Marine, his leg torn apart, and a pair of swift, steady hands working in the darkness, applying pressure, stopping the blood, saving a life. The vision disappeared as fast as it came, leaving him standing on the hot pavement, his hand still on her arm, his mind spinning. 50 yards away, near the edge of the parade field, Gunnery Sergeant Evans was trying to keep the growing crowd of families from stepping onto the grass. He was a career Marine, a man whose face was a roadmap of deployments and whose posture was as straight as the flagpole. He'd seen everything this place could throw at a man and everything the world could throw at a Marine. His job today was simple, keeping people in line, but he was always watching, always thinking. He noticed the scene with Captain Hayes. He knew Hayes, a decent officer but young, overly eager, and prone to seeing the world through the narrow view of a rulebook. Evans watched him confronting the blonde woman. He saw it getting worse, the lance corporal arriving, the cluster of onlookers growing. Bad form. Whatever the reason, you don't embarrass a civilian, a mother, on graduation day. It looked bad for the Corps. He was about to walk over and quietly calm things down, maybe pull the captain aside for a word, when he saw Hayes grab the woman's arm. He saw her sleeve slide up. Even from 50 yards away, with eyes trained to spot details from a kilometer out, he caught the flash of black ink on her wrist. He squinted, his focus sharpening. He couldn't make out the details, but he saw the shape, the knife, the snakes. A jolt shot through him, electric and deep. It couldn't be. He started walking, his pace controlled but urgent. He closed the distance, eyes locked on the tattoo. He got closer, close enough to read the words. Phantom Fury. Gunnery Sergeant Evans stopped in his tracks. His blood went cold. He knew that tattoo. He'd only seen it once before in a faded photo in a veteran's hall, on the arm of a hardened first sergeant who spoke of it in hushed, reverent tones. It wasn't an official symbol. It was something more sacred. It was a blood bond, a mark of survival and deep gratitude given only to a handful of Navy corpsmen who had served with a specific Marine unit during the deadliest street fighting of the Iraq War. It was the mark of a legend. He looked from the tattoo to the woman's calm, steady face, and then to Captain Hayes's expression of smug certainty. Evans felt a wave of cold dread. Hayes wasn't just making a mistake. He was committing something unforgivable. Without hesitation, Evans turned and pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't call the military police. He didn't call the duty officer. He bypassed the entire chain of command and dialed a number he'd only used twice in his entire career. The personal cell phone of the depot sergeant major. The phone was answered on the second ring. "Sergeant Major, this is Gunny Evans down at the parade field. Sir, I'm sorry for calling directly, but we have a situation here that needs your immediate attention." "No sir, not a security threat. It's Captain Hayes. He's got a woman held up down here. A civilian guest." Evans paused, taking a steadying breath. "Sergeant Major, it's Doc Lo." Stunned silence came from the other end of the line. Evans could almost hear the old warrior's mind working, connecting the name to the legend. "Are you certain, Gunny?" The sergeant major's voice was a low growl. "I'm looking at the Ka-bar caduceus on her wrist right now, Sergeant Major." "It's her," Evans confirmed. "And Captain Hayes is about to put her in handcuffs." "Keep him there," the sergeant major ordered, his voice now like steel. "Don't let him move her. The colonel is on his way." The line went dead. Gunnery Sergeant Evans slid his phone back into his pocket, his face showing nothing, and started walking toward Captain Hayes, a storm on the horizon that only he could see. Inside the base command building, Colonel Thompson was on the phone with the Sergeant Major, who was passing along Gunnery Sergeant Evans's urgent message. The colonel, a man whose usual expression was one of patient sternness, felt a jolt of disbelief. "Doc Lo, are you telling me Brenda Lo is on my base right now?" he asked, his voice sharp. He waved to his aide, a sharp young major. "Pull up the file for Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Brenda M. Lo from the Navy Archives. Do it now." The major, recognizing the rare urgency in the colonel's voice, flew to her computer. Within seconds she was pulling records from a secure server. A service photo appeared on the screen, a much younger Brenda, her face framed by a Navy cap, her eyes clear and fiercely determined. Then the awards began to load. A Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, a Purple Heart, and then the big one, the Silver Star. The colonel and the sergeant major read the award citation on the screen in stunned silence. "For remarkable bravery and courage in action against the enemy while serving as a hospital corpsman for 3rd Platoon, Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines in connection with combat operations during Operation Phantom Fury in Fallujah, Iraq, on the 14th of November, when a rocket-propelled grenade struck the 2nd floor of their building, collapsing part of the roof and wounding 6 Marines. Petty Officer Lo, with complete disregard for her own safety, charged through a storm of enemy machine gun fire into the unstable rubble. For 3 hours she moved from casualty to casualty, shielding them with her own body while providing life-saving treatment. She single-handedly maintained direct pressure on a severed femoral artery for over an hour, refusing to be relieved until the wounded Marine could be evacuated, an action that directly saved his life. Her extraordinary courage, determined initiative, and total dedication to duty reflected great credit upon herself and were in keeping with the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. Below the official citation were after-action reports and personal accounts, words from Marines who were now sergeants major and lieutenant colonels themselves, calling her the angel of the block. They spoke of her running into gunfire to grab medical supplies, of her calm voice in the chaos, of her refusal to leave anyone behind. The sergeant major let out a low whistle. "Good Lord, sir, it's really her." Colonel Thompson's face was hard as stone. "She is a guest at my command about to watch her son graduate, and one of my captains has her detained on the side of the road." He looked at the sergeant major, his eyes burning. "Get the command vehicle now, and tell Gunny Evans to hold position." Back at the path, Captain Hayes had taken Brenda's cold statement as a challenge to his authority. He was completely blind to the massive forces of history shifting beneath his feet. He saw the tattoo, but it meant nothing to him. Some fake wannabe artwork, he thought. More evidence that this woman was a problem. "A mistake, ma'am. The only mistake was mine in thinking you'd be reasonable," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. He gestured to the lance corporal. "Go get some zip-tie cuffs from the vehicle." To Brenda he said, "I'm officially detaining you for trespassing on a federal installation and failure to obey a lawful order from a commissioned officer. You'll be taken to the military police office where we'll sort this out. Your son can hear about his mother's arrest after he graduates." It was the final arrogant push, the threat involving her son, the public humiliation, the sheer blindness of it all crossed a line. Brenda didn't flinch. She simply held his gaze, a deep and ancient disappointment in her eyes. "You really have no idea what you're doing, do you?" Just as the words left her mouth, a silent storm arrived. A black, spotless command vehicle with a colonel's eagle symbol on the bumper pulled up to the curb, its tires making no sound. It didn't use sirens or lights. Its presence alone commanded more attention than any alarm. The doors opened together. Out stepped Colonel Thompson, the base commander. Beside him was the depot sergeant major, a man whose hard stare could make a statue sweat. With them was the female major from the colonel's office. They moved with synchronized, predatory grace, their eyes fixed on the scene. They completely ignored Captain Hayes. Their focus was locked on one person, Brenda Lo. The growing crowd of onlookers fell silent. The air crackled with sudden, unexplained tension. Captain Hayes froze, his hand still on Brenda's arm, his mouth half open, his entire world knocked off balance. Colonel Thompson walked directly to Brenda, stopping exactly 3 feet in front of her. He looked at Captain Hayes's hand on her arm, and his eyes narrowed with such cold fury that Hayes jerked it back as if he'd touched fire. Then the colonel did something that shattered the captain's understanding of reality. He snapped his heels together, his back perfectly straight, and delivered the sharpest, most formal salute Hayes had ever witnessed. It was a salute reserved for Medal of Honor recipients, for visiting generals, for legends. "Doc Lo." The colonel's voice rang out across the silent space, clear and strong. It is an absolute honor to have you aboard Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island, ma'am. A wave of confused whispers rippled through the crowd. Captain Hayes's face went white. He stared in disbelief as the sergeant major and the major also rendered perfect, respectful salutes. The colonel lowered his hand but remained at attention. He turned his head slightly, making sure his voice would carry to everyone present, especially Captain Hayes. For those of you who don't know, the colonel began, his voice ringing with pride and authority. This woman is a Navy Silver Star recipient. She is not just a guest, she is a hero to this institution. He looked directly at Brenda, genuine deep respect in his eye. On November 14, 2004, in the city of Fallujah, then Petty Officer Lo ran through enemy machine gun and rocket fire to save 6 wounded Marines from the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. She treated them alone, under fire, in a collapsed building for 3 straight hours. The colonel's voice grew stronger, each word a hammer blow to Captain Hayes's ignorance. The Marines of Kilo Company don't call her Petty Officer Lo. They call her the Angel of the Block. They credit her with saving the entire platoon. The Ka bar and caduceus on her wrist, he said, gesturing toward her tattoo, is a mark of honor given to her by the Marines she saved. A mark of honor, Captain, that you saw fit to dismiss and disrespect. Across the parade field, Brenda's son Adam, standing in formation, saw the commotion. He saw the black vehicle, the colonel, and his mother at the center of it all. He watched in stunned confusion as the highest-ranking officer on the base saluted his mom. The stories she had told him, modest and humble accounts of her time in the Navy, suddenly felt like massive understatement. The crowd was now completely silent. Their faces showed a mixture of awe and dawning understanding. They were in the presence of quiet, unassuming greatness. Colonel Thompson finally turned his icy gaze upon Captain Hayes. His voice dropped to a low, deadly growl that was far more terrifying than any shout. Captain, you will report to my office at 1500 hours. You will bring a pen and a notebook. We are going to have a long conversation about leadership, judgment, and the grave error of failing to recognize a giant standing right in front of you. You looked at a decorated combat veteran, a hero of the Corps, and you saw an inconvenience. You failed to observe. You failed to think. You failed to decide wisely. You just acted on arrogance and assumption. Dismissed. Captain Hayes stood frozen, his face a mask of dawning horror and shame. He could only manage a choked, "Aye, aye, sir." Brenda watched him, not with triumph, but with tired understanding. She stepped forward slight. "Colonel, with all due respect, sir," she said, her voice calm and clear once more. The captain was trying to enforce security rules. The rules aren't the problem. She then looked at Hayes, her gaze not accusing, but teaching. The problem is the assumptions we make before we apply the rule. We're trained to see the uniform, not the person. But sometimes we need to learn to see the person, even when the uniform has been put away. The title is earned forever. As she spoke, a final vivid image flashed through her mind. It wasn't of the battle but of the quiet aftermath. She was sitting in a dusty, dimly lit tent, her hands still stained with blood and dirt. A big, burly Marine sergeant, his arm in a sling, sat before her. He held a sterilized Ka bar tip dipped in ink. With the steady hand of a surgeon, he was carefully drawing the design onto her wrist. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. The quiet intensity of his work, the respectful silence of the other survivors in the tent, said everything. It was their way of saying thank you. It was their way of making her one of them forever. The graduation ceremony went on, but the atmosphere had shifted. News of what happened had spread through the crowd and the ranks like wildfire. Brenda Lo was escorted to the seat of honor on the main reviewing stand by the colonel himself. When Adam's platoon marched by, he caught his mother's eye. The look on his face was one of overwhelming awe and a new, deep understanding of the quiet, humble woman who had raised him. Their reunion after the ceremony was emotional, a hug that held years of unspoken history. Later that afternoon at the reception, a humbled Captain Hayes approached her. He stood before her, his posture no longer arrogant, but respectful. "Ma'am," he began, his voice quiet. "There's no excuse for my behavior. I was arrogant, I was unprofessional, and I was wrong. I am truly deeply sorry." Brenda looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a villain, but a young officer, who had learned a hard and necessary lesson. "Apology accepted, Captain," she said. "Let me give you some advice. Before you check a person's ID, or their pass or the rank on their collar, look them in the eyes first. You'll learn a lot more that way." In the months that followed, a new training module was quietly introduced for all junior officers at Parris Island. It focused on how to interact with veterans and families, emphasizing awareness and the danger of making assumptions. It was never officially named after the incident, but everyone knew where it came from. It was a small but important change, a seed of wisdom, planted on a hot day on a paved path. Brenda Lo's story reminds us that heroes rarely announce themselves. Their bravery is not written in headlines, but in the lives they saved, in the quiet respect they earned in the fires of combat. To honor all our veterans and to hear more stories of humble courage, like and subscribe to Shio's Valor. Your support helps us keep these vital legacies alive.